Howdy, partners. This is Joe Straczynski coming to you live from my living room. Well, not technically live. I mean, this is being recorded ahead of time, but I'm alive. I am alive. Unless you heard something. I mean, if you heard something from my doctor, I think you should tell me because I should know these things. But I'm coming to you today with our latest commentary on Comes the Inquisitor, about which there are many interesting stories. To bring you up to speed on other stuff for a second, the Babylon 5 pilot script has been turned in to the CW after passing muster with Warner Brothers and with the CW itself. And we are hoping to hear something soon. There is the question, of course, always of what will happen with this new purchase possibility of the CW being bought by somebody else. I don't know any more than you do. My suspicion is it won't matter because that process will take about a year to get taken care of between negotiations. Is the money right? Is the deal right? Then the FCC has to approve it. That process can take a year. Now, during that period of time, they have to continue producing programs. So my hope is that this won't make a difference and that they will see B5 as a way to raise the value of the network and the programs and all that good stuff. I don't know that for a fact, but my gut says that. My gut also says many things after dinner. I need a lot of antacids and that kind of thing, but I'm ignoring that part of it, but I think we're going to be okay. So, as ever, you in the Patreon sphere will be the first to know what's going on, why, and wherefore. Meanwhile, we can now proceed with the Comes the Inquisitor commentary. A lot of C's in that sentence. As always, we will do a sync-up commentary. So if you're at home or in a hotel or at school or at work, prison, a hospital, funeral home, I leave that to your discretion. What you do in your private life is your own business. But wherever you are, sync up the beginning of the episode. I will hit play on this magical device, and we will see what happens in the course of the commentary for Comes the Inquisitor. Counting down, 3, 2, 1, and press. As always, I'm using subtitles because I'm tired of YouTube yelling at me for having dialogue from my own show on my own commentaries. So here we have G'Kar saying exactly what's going to happen. He really was my Cassandra figure. Cassandra was a individual who essentially prophesied things that were going to happen, but of course no one believed what was being said. Just as here in this crowd we see people just sort of turning away and not being terribly interested. This is quite a fall for G'Kar. I wanted to have him go from being, you know, obviously the ambassador and a person of great importance to a guy in a street corner trying to get attention, handing out leaflets. There's something quite sad about that fall. But yet he manages to carry on in a spirit of determination and dignity and nobility. And boy, you can really see that suit in this new HBO Max re-render. There are so many colors and textures in his costume. The costume designer had this idea that you're never quite sure what you're looking at. There's always something different going. Is that a feather? Is that leather? Is that something else? Is it cloth? And it all kind of goes together really beautifully. We have now foreshadowed Vir in a moment or two having his conversation with others. And Delenn being summoned by a Vorlon, this is never a good sign when the Vorlons say, I want to talk to you. It's like when the teacher says, stay after class, we have to have a conversation. Which, by the way, happened to me a great deal. Usually followed by, get out. To the question of why send an Inquisitor, to be honest, the Vorlons are not wrong. Their methods may be unduly harsh, but they're not wrong to want to find out if indeed the person they're backing is the right person. And yeah, it's life or death for her, But if she's the wrong person, how many more lives will be sacrificed? How many more lives will be lost? They have to know that they're betting on the right horse, if you will. So I think the strenuousness of their examination is to a degree warranted. I mean, it was really hard to write this because I love the character of Delenn. Mira loved playing it. She really liked sinking her teeth into the drama of this. But having someone do these, harsh things to Delenn was really a hard thing for me to write. But again, it was the correct thing to do. We have a tradition here on Earth of false prophets. Some would say that we have some real prophets too. I'm not going to get into that. But certainly we have had our share of false ones. And when they go down, they don't just go down alone. They usually take with them a lot of other people. Look at Jim Jones as a really good example of this. He believed he was a prophet. He was going to change the world and created this empire this cult that destroyed him and everyone who followed him. So, yeah, it was kind of the right thing to do. I hate saying it, even though I wrote it, which is a weird thing to do. But anyway, onward with the show after the titles are done here. When Sheridan gives them Grey 19 for her conference with the Inquisitor, people said that was really clever because Grey represents the Grey Council. 19 is the 1 and the 9. And were congratulating me on how smart I was. And I'm not that smart. I knew it had to be Grey sector because they had the most privacy there and there's not a lot of folks running around to interfere. And 19 just sounded good. I mean, we've had Grey 17 and it seemed like two doors down from that. So no, I'm not that smart. I'd like to be that smart, but I'm not that smart. And for how much we've seen Sheridan kind of stepping up and doing his part and risking his life, we need really to see Delenn doing the same thing. To me, this was always an equal partnership, an equal relationship, an equal working relationship as well. And that weight needed to be balanced. I think that Delenn's character, even at this point, would have had some self-doubt. She knows her own history. She knows that she's made mistakes in the past. And as Lanier says, if you do the right thing for the wrong reasons, or the wrong thing for the right reasons, either way the work is corrupted. And I think she needs clarity. I think if she comes out of this believing and having reaffirmed that she's the right person, it'll give her more strength to carry on. Versus if it doesn't go that well, and maybe she does have some grounds to be concerned, to have self-doubt. And just, that prosthetic isn't sitting quite right. You can see the edges of the prosthetic in the close-up, which is not terrific. And we have G'Kar buying weapons. So there's a funny story about this episode in Babylon 5 in general. You've all seen the Cinderella story, where there's 3 sisters, and the 2 are favored, and Cinderella is not, and she spends all of her time cleaning up, being a scullery maid, and when the big ball is announced, the other 2 sisters get to go, and she has to stay home. This was kind of our relationship to Warner Brothers at this particular time of the show. Emblematic of that, they did not want to send out our episodes for Emmy consideration. We were the stepsister that lived in the basement. They didn't want anything to do with us. They didn't want to know from us. They were off to the side somewhere. And they just would not send out the tapes, because a lot of folks didn't watch these shows. You watch them when you get in the screeners, as we are now doing in Oscar season. And they didn't want to do it. So we did it ourselves. And because we sent out the tapes to the Television Academy, which were then distributed, we got the occasional nomination. including a nomination for this episode for John Flynn for cinematography. And we also won a couple for effects. And Warner's couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. Then they found out that we were sending our own copies. And they went batshit. They were so pissed off that we were doing this, even though we were getting nominations, that they told us to stop. And I said, rather annoyed, well, on what grounds can you tell us to stop? And a person of business affairs called and said, look, Warner Brothers Television Distribution is the only entity that can produce episodes of the show on cassette to be given to others. By you producing episodes and distributing them on cassette, you are infringing upon our sovereign right to do so ourselves, our exclusivity, and if we keep doing this, we will sue you. So we stopped making the copies. And in short order, the nominations that we could have gotten, we didn't get. Flynn's nomination here was one of the last ones that we got. They didn't want anybody to even know the show existed. And they had a really good success rate with that. They actually did a pretty good job of it. So, back to the episode. Wayne Alexander was kind of our go-to guy for characters, particularly alien characters. And what he did that was very smart early on is he went in to have his face cast for Optic Nerve, our prosthetics company. So whenever we needed an alien who could be, a really good character, Optic Nerve already had his head cast. They could just bam knock it out and put it on him and he'd be ready to go. But Wayne is extraordinary talent and an actor. Whatever you give him to do, he will knock it out of the park. And one of the hardest things to do, given how many times Jack the Ripper has been portrayed on television and films, how do you do something that looks and feels different? But he was able to, with this really stark image, and I think he darkened his cheeks a little bit to make it look more gaunt. He had these haunted eyes. He was just riveting to look at. And the performance was so imposing and so strong. He was just, in this episode in particular, he also did Lorien and many other roles. Just so phenomenal. You buy him immediately. When Wardrobe showed me the hat, I wasn't sure about it. But boy, does he pull it off. He has everything about him that says that period and says Jack the Ripper. The imperiousness of his behavior. I've always had my own theory on Jack. There were a number of things that happened with the murders that point to someone who really hasn't gotten a lot of attention. Someone who was working with those in the East End. I know I said the West End the first of the broadcast, I corrected it, but in the East End, in Spitalfield, who had access to a number of people who were later murdered, actually was related to the guy with whom the last victim was living with in her quarters. And it was someone who had apparently had a bit of a nervous breakdown. And in all of the history of the London Times, or Times of London, only one person ever sent a letter to the Times trying to justify Jack's behavior, saying that he's trying to send a message about cleaning up the Spitalfields area. If we listened to him, maybe he would stop. That person is Mrs. Reverend Samuel Barnett. And Samuel Barnett fits a lot of the criteria. He was interviewed twice by the London police. The records of that conversation have been sealed at the request of the church ever since. We don't know what was said. So there's something going on there. Reverend Samuel Barnett's name keeps coming up too many times in the literature not to have something to do with this, or at least be a person of interest, as they say now. So we will see, but they always go for the celebrity of, oh, Jack the Ripper was this person, is a prince or a king or whomever. Most serial killers, as we know now, aren't that way. They like, do it because they think God is telling them to do it. There's ordinary average person who thinks that they're on a mission, or that Son of Sam, or the Night Stalker here in the valley. Others, think they're being told by God to do something, or by the devil, or by a dog. So anyway, I think that there's something to be looked into there. I liked, as the show goes on, how the relationship between Garibaldi and G'Kar grows, where he goes from being this person who Garibaldi likes to screw with and an opposition force, to respecting him enough to say, look, I know what you're doing, I know why you're doing it. You can't do it here, which is what G'Kar expects him to say. Then to come back and say, look, I can help. You didn't lie to me. You've showed me that respect. Let me do the same and give you the same respect in return. And the fun of there's always the Londo-G'Kar relationship and how that changes. It's also the trinity of the Londo-G'Kar relationship, the Londo-Garibaldi relationship, and the G'Kar-Garibaldi relationship. And those also change with time. As he gets closer to G'Kar, he gets farther from Londo. And that's a sadness of Londo's story, losing those who could be his friends. And the joy of G'Kar's is finding a much larger world. We wanted a very stark environment, so not much in the way of furniture. We hadn't really used the downward facing lights much since the pilot, because I felt that they were unflattering. They put kind of a shadow in the eyes of the characters. So what we did sort of cheat a little bit. They're downward facing lights, but if you look at them carefully, they are angled a little bit. And the angling allows you to see more of the faces of the characters. So it looks like it's dead straight down in that shot there. We're on Delenn. It does seem that way, but there was just enough of a pop to make it work. I never really liked these cuffs. They are just way too big. Whenever people design for the future, they tend to make them big. They put nurnies on them and make them very big. But what we've seen with iPhones and everything else is that as things go into the future, props or artifacts get smaller, more compact, the technology is less visible. And the Vorlons in particular, they would have much sleeker cuffs. These are too easily removed, and they're kind of in the way. What Sebastian does here is he's playing a game that is known to people who've got their psychology degrees, as a Synanon game. The Synanon game was part of a therapeutic model that was based on the same basic principles that Jack is applying here. You ask the same question over and over again, and you don't allow the person to repeat the same answer twice. Who are you being the main one? Because you ask me, who am I? I'm Joe Straczynski. Who are you? I'm a writer. I write and produce television. Who are you? I'm a man. I'm a citizen of California. I'm a liberal. But who are you? And the more you grind down, the more you get to some of the more important truths. So in college, as part of my training, I also experienced and played the Synanon game, and wanted to sort of bring that approach into this episode. And I love just the crispness of Wayne's delivery here and the confrontational aspect of it. And again, he's not wrong by saying to her, you don't really know who you are. And does she or has she ever had to ask those questions? I'm not entirely big on the whirling lights. I mean, they were worried about this being a very stationary episode, which it is. But I think that using the lights to try and mitigate that may have not been the wisest of choices. But I could be wrong. Here we have him referring to the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that those who believe that they are, chosen by God tend to be the ones that cause the most heartache in the long run. Watch how rarely he blinks. The thing about being an actor in television, you learn not to blink when the camera's on you when you are talking, because blinking makes you look weak. So an actor will hold their eyes open no matter how much it's stinging, no matter what's going on, how much smoke is in the room, as much as humanly possible to not blink, unless it's like a moment of character or a moment she like shifts her mood. Mary did the same thing, but here she's a little more, because she is in a weaker position, she's blinking more to sort of show that. I'm not sure how much it's a conscious thing, but it's a thing that is a technique that actors apply. This is also where my background in theater comes in. I love just putting two characters in a room, slamming the door, and let's see what happens next. Whether it's a tube door or something else. And here we have these two remarkable actors in a room just talking. And the confrontation is not physical until that begins to happen. It is a psychological warfare. One could almost say spiritual warfare. And he really has come here prepared to be disappointed, and that's his truth. He believes he's about to be disappointed one more time. Slight cheat here, as it got into the tube, you really should be able to see G'Kar, but you don't, and so he appears later on. Again, this is an example of two characters in a small space, and not much is said. You leave it to the eyes, you leave it to the actors, you leave it to the moment. Stephen's at first apprehension, then you see fear in his face, and you see guilt, and you see shame, and it's all done in the eyes. It's all done in the performance, and versus the resolute silence of Andreas as G'Kar. I mean, if you saw that staring at you, I think you would be pretty freaked out by it. And he turns, as if to confront him, and then out comes what he's really thinking is, I'm sorry. But we're at a point now in the story where apologies no longer hack it. We're way past the point of apologies now. And to a degree, one could say that Vera is complicit by virtue of sticking around, which is, I think, part of what comes out of the scene is what motivates him later on to get more involved and to be more of assistance to the Narns. This point where he cuts his hand was apparently cut out by British television. They thought it was too much. So he just walks out. As I understand, I've never seen the British Cup. I was told by those who had seen it that this was omitted as being too graphic violence. And the point G'Kar makes here is valid. If someone hurts me, well, there are few survivors, but let's say for a second they do survive. If someone hurts me, I can forgive them or choose to forgive them. But if someone hurts someone I care about, I don't have the option of forgiving that person. I don't have the authority to forgive that person. For me, it's total warfare until that other person forgives them. Each day, by the time these two actors were done, they were just exhausted from, I mean, there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of words. When he says, you'll be carried out of here by other forces and rescued from all this, there is an element here of Christ's temptation in the devil. The devil says, where are the angels who are coming for you? Where's the salvation coming? They've abandoned you here. I'll steal from anything, whether it's the Bible, philosophy, psychology. It all dials into the storytelling process. And the primal scream here, we see this later on too when G'Kar is told to scream and doesn't until the very end. So here we have Sebastian as Satan, if you will, waiting for Delen's saviors to arrive, and it is a silence as vast as space. When the whale swallowed Jonah, again, I've read the Bible cover to cover twice. There are some really good parts in there, some excellent writing in Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, the book of Job. There's also some terrible, terrible writing in there. But, it could have used a really good editor, but honestly, you can't expect God to be everything. And here we see Delen's, one could say, ego coming out. If the world says that she's wrong, and she believes she's right, does she proceed? It's the things that he's saying to her. Look at the expression on his face. The moment of sadness, the moment of actual humanity that comes through. Everything he's saying to her are things that he himself, that she herself has thought about in the past. When he gets actually moved by her, that's, watch the eyes. This whole episode is about eyes. It's about contact. And you see the crack in his exterior, in his formality, and his brutality come out with her. And for a moment, his attitude gentles. And you can see that there's a person inside there. The notion, of course, on Sebastian is that the Vorlons have, as I said, have been around for a really long time and have gone to a lot of worlds to imprint upon us their image, their form as being in some way beatific, some way godlike or angelic. So of course they would have been to Earth, and of course they would have, from time to time popped in to see if there's anyone who can be of service to us. And if you want someone who is willing to come at this from a almost religious point of view, who believes that he is right, that he is always on the right side, that the world is wrong and Jack is right, there's very few who would fit that role as well. Conscienceless, smart, deadly, on a crusade, as some have suggested Jack was. So, who to set a fox, to get a fox but another fox? Again, look at the close-ups in this scene with G'Kar and his followers. Everything in this episode is played really close to camera. Usually you have big wide shots like this one with Sebastian and Delen. But so much of the show is just barely establishing a wide shot that boom, you pop into the close-up. This is all about eyes, about contact, about conversations. The hard part of writing Jack was I wanted there to be an unusual syntax to his dialogue. There are moments it doesn't quite touch free verse poetry, but it gets kind of in that neighborhood from time to time, which is part of making him larger than life. Even His diction, even the way he speaks, elevates him. The cane gives a click-clack when he walks like a machine. He talks about being a part of the machine, that thinks it's the whole of it rather than the cog. You say you've taken too much joy in the application of pain. That's definitely Jack. And here, as much as he's been trying to find who he is, she's nailed him. She's figured out his game. She figured out who he is. And as much as what he says to her is her truth, what she says to him is his truth, the one that he can't face. And you see in his face when it drops. And he doesn't admit it or not, he just changes the subject. Bang. And who are you? Back to that. Back to the question. Do you have a destiny? Who do you think you are? He's trying to break her in the most fundamental way possible. There's also a certain amount of, again, go back to the Bible again for a moment, Pontius Pilate here to say, why are you putting up with this? Why aren't you defending yourself? I have control over you. I have power over you. And the sentiment came back of, no, you really have no power here. This episode is also the earliest test of the Rangers to see what they can actually pull off. We've been seeing them in the shadows for a while now, but we haven't seen them do a heck of a lot. And now it's the right time to put that to the test. We don't see it. There was a point where I thought briefly about, what if I show someone on Narn, getting the information that G'Kar needs. And I almost did it, but then I thought, no, if I break away, then I am going to break the tension. This needs to stay laser focused on what's happening in Grey 19 with Sebastian and Delenn. So I opted not to go to Narn. We'll save that for another time. And everyone's playing to their vested interest here. G'Kar has his vested interest. Sheridan needs him as a credible figure. Everyone has their agendas here. And Bill is great in this scene. Lennier doesn't get a lot of opportunities to really show a lot of strong emotion, but his affection for Delenn means that he loses it here a little bit. It's such a great dynamic with these two actors. I swear to God, Mira could bring a good performance out of a piece of brass. She was just that strong. And this is kind of, again, where Sheridan steps up a little bit against the caution of the Vorlons. We see that later on as well. But for him to step up against the Inquisitor, the ambassador, if you will, for the Vorlons in this episode, that takes some doing. And this is one of the first points where he begins to realize that he has to step up. Throughout the course of the show, we have kind of painted the Vorlons as the good guys. The Shadows are the bad guys, the Vorlons are the good guys, because that tends to be how most science fiction shows work. These are the enemies, these are our good guys. And what I wanted to point to is they are two opposing sides of a much larger issue that isn't and can't be rendered in good and bad terms. The Vorlons represent enforced order, and the Shadows represent enforced chaos. I don't think you can say for sure one way or the other is bad. You can go too far with order and give rise to fascism. A little bit of chaos is probably good for the soul, but too much chaos is bad on every possible level. So I wanted to take this opportunity with this episode to kind of dust up the Vorlons a bit and say to the audience, they may not be who you think they are. It says something, that Sheridan was expected. And Sheridan, and it said the last of our players has arrived. He knew he would come. These two characters, Delenn and Sheridan, are linked at the hip. And what's interesting is that we saw controlled anger with Delenn, not anger, but determination and harshness with Delenn. But here, he looks at Sheridan, and you feel genuine rage, genuine anger. And when he starts lashing out at him, it's very personal. I was like, this is hell, and you were its chief damned soul. That's, again, the kind of dialogue that is designed to enhance who he is by making him more poetic, if you will. He gets more and more hysterical with what about right, what about wrong, your future, faith. And in a way, he's almost self-flagellating. These are the same things that he has thought. And he also he knows he needs to activate Delenn. And that means pushing Sheridan to the max to get her to step up. And the question is, will she do so? And she does. The real point of this is for her to realize at core what she's about. That it's all about life. As she says, one life, all lives. Her job, her role is the preservation of life. That is her cause. And if she falls, more will come behind her. It's not about her. It's about saving life. It's about doing the right thing for the right reasons. And when no one knows what you've done, when no one knows what you sacrificed, what you've endured, but you're willing to do it anyway, that's when you are more inclined to realize that you are doing the right thing for the right reasons. This body's only a shell. You can't touch me. You can't hurt me. I had a friend in high school who was being harassed by other people and said that to them and then got away. And that always stuck with me, that the body is just the shell. Who I am in here, you can't get to. That's private, that's me, that's off limits. And there's nothing you can do to hurt that. And it stayed with me ever since high school. And I needed something for her to say that came bubbling up from my subconscious from many, many years ago. I love the way he's holding Delenn, and you see them now as the couple they're going to really become. Again, another biblical reference. There's a large spiritual component to this thing. And I tend to believe this. I think that the most noble things happen where no one can see it. It's not being done for fame or fortune. It's because it's the right thing to do. You do the right thing for the right reasons. And his expression is almost beatific. It's almost relieved. He knows that he's done his job and this is probably going to be over now. And whatever doubts that Sheridan or she may have been having going to the future, those are now resolved. And now that the doubts are going to be sanded away, then they can be what they have to be on the next level. Those two are so great together. I always liked having Sheridan as a student of history. And he would recognize something about what Sebastian said. Of course, there were probably a lot of people named Sebastian at that time and in that place, even at that address. So it's, yeah. I liked that he was able to parse this and figure this out. When I wrote the script, I knew the murders took place in the East End, as I mentioned earlier, but whenever I've gone to London, I tend to hang out in the West End because that's where the theaters are, that's where the restaurants are, a lot of areas to walk. The Savoy Hotel is in the area. My one Savoy Hotel story, Richard Harris, who played Dumbledore in the Harry Potter movies and many other fine films, a terrific actor, well-known drinker. I mean, he could knock them back with the best of them. He and Peter O'Toole would have not lost weekends, but lost months. Richard Harris lived at the Savoy Hotel, because who wouldn't? And I was staying there quite a few years ago. Got in late one evening, and the elevators in the Savoy Hotel are about coffin size. It can carry maybe 3 or 4 people if they're all very packed in. And the door opens, I go into the elevator, and the doors start to close, and then a hand shoves in, and the door opens. It's Richard Harris, who is so inebriated that he walks into the elevator sideways. And I didn't know you could do that. And as we're going up in this very slow elevator, he's talking about the fact that these are the first elevators ever installed in London, gave me their history, the assignations that took place there. And as we get to his floor, the door's open. He looks at me and says, "Do I know you?" I said, "No, sir." "Well, then why am I talking to you?" And walks out sideways. That was my encounter with greatness, with the great Richard Harris. And his concluding moments, again, look how the shots are framed. All about the close-ups, all about the eyes. The subtitle still says West End. Crap. I need to talk to someone about fixing it. I can't believe it's still there. Oh my God. And this rationale that he applies is the rationale that I believe that Samuel Barnett would have been interested in sending, as echoed by his wife's letter. And I think all the true false prophets do terrible things, unspeakable things in service of their holy cause. And others pay the price, whether it's Jim Jones or those who were murdered for the wrong reasons, those who were savage, those who were lost. Certitude has its place, but certitude can be so destructive when it's powered by religious fanaticism. Not to say that it's a requirement, God knows, as it were. We've had plenty of fascists who were not religious, but still, it certainly helps to grease the wheels, if you will. And his performance here, as he talks about 400 years of penance, look at the eyes, look at the sadness in there, at the horror of that. This is probably one of the finest performances that Wayne Alexander ever gave to us. Just so brilliant. And the first scene with him and Sheridan was shot the same day as this last scene with him, because we always shot by the set. So they had to process the emotions of that first meeting with the departure. And it comes out so beautifully. As he walks into the light, you see his hatred for his own name, for Jack. There are sometimes you write something and you watch the eyes drop. You write something and you hope it'll come out as well as you think it's going to come out, and you hope the performance will be there. Man, was it there with this episode. This was so strong and so moving. Everyone was right on form. Stephen, Wayne, Bruce, Jerry, Mira, they were all just dead on. And I'm very proud of this episode. And John Flynn definitely deserved his nomination for cinematography in this episode. It was just quite extraordinary. So that, my friends, was Comes the Inquisitor. Thank you for sticking around for this commentary. And I will see you for the next one. Stay out of trouble.